how much those words mean to us right now. All of us could use a little healing. Shana Tova. Before I begin my talk tonight, I just want to acknowledge that last year when we led, there was no one here. We're not quite where we want to be, and as you heard from our messages and emails, we're not quite home in the way that we want to celebrate our holidays. But we're getting there. We're getting closer. The title of my talk is Finding Our Way Back Home Together. This June, Ashira and I were taking an evening stroll through a wooded area when we found ourselves in the middle of a golf course. Not being golfers ourselves, we marveled at the picturesque landscape full of rolling hills and smooth fairways and intimidating roughs. Meandering between holes, we lost the place where we had originally entered the course. It was getting dark, and the more we searched, the more lost and the more tired we became. We had two choices: follow our GPS signal and take the main road back to the hotel, well over a mile out of our way, or choice number two, keep on searching until we found our way back. As the time ticked away, we tried to remember which hole was nearest to the entrance to the forest. I suggested 3, and Ashira thought 7. We were both wrong. And following bad lead after bad lead, we were close to giving up. For our final attempt, as the waning sun disappeared over the hills, we simply followed the line of trees at the edge of the course. Eureka! After a few more minutes of wandering, we found the spot. It was the second hole. Walking with our iPhone flashlights blazing, we fumbled our way through the darkness until we found the original trail. We had made it back to safety. Getting lost on a golf course felt like a very foolish thing to do. Has anyone ever done that before? Am I the only one? But it also felt fitting, as we have gotten lost in many, many places, even familiar ones, this past year. The pandemic has been a time of losing ourselves in places in the world that had always felt safe and comfortable up until COVID-19. Supermarkets, retail establishments, synagogues, and even our own homes. The rules of behavior had changed, and we often had to feel around as if we were walking through the dark. Just by show of hands here, how many of you have felt a little lost during the pandemic? And you can raise even virtually. How many of you still feel that way today? How many of you thought you found your way only to find yourself on the wrong path again? For over a year and a half, we have endured outbreak after outbreak, searching for a way to live our lives without endangering others or ourselves. Every few weeks, the experts have come to a new understanding about how the virus works and about how we should proceed safely with the new data, leaving us confused and unsure of what to do. How will we ever find the right path forward? How will we learn to adapt to these ever-changing circumstances? A few stories, each with their own unique lesson, that might help give us some guidance about how to proceed ahead. First, a famous Hasidic parable that's included in the Kol HaNeshama Reconstructionist Machzor, and it's attributed to the Hasidic Rebbe Hayang of Zangs. It describes a sojourner hopelessly lost after traveling in a forest for several days. The person sees someone approaching, overjoyed that now finally they will discover a way out. Approaching one another, the lost person asked the stranger, "Please tell me which way I should go to get out of this forest. I have been wandering about for several days and am unable to find my way out." The stranger replies, "I'm sorry, I do not know the way out either, for I too have been wandering about here for many, many days. But this I can tell you, Do not take the way I have been going, for that way will lead you astray. Now, let's look for a new way together. Lesson number one from story number one is that getting lost is not the worst possible of outcomes. Getting lost alone is. We certainly felt that during the pandemic. The people we were most worried about were the shut-ins and the lost souls. And through our caring network, we set up a calling tree, reaching dozens and dozens of congregants when they most needed support. It was the least we could do to make this time period a little bit more bearable than it is. Now for story number two. This one I found in Michael Lewis's The Premonition. It's a book I highly recommend if you want to know about the pandemic and what happened. It features many of his heroes, including Dr. Carter Metcher, who is just, you have to read about him. But he, in the book, tells a story about troops that get lost in the Alps in World War I. They're in a blizzard, said Carter. A guy finds a map in his backpack. The map leads them to safety. What was cool about the story, Carter thought, was that once the soldiers were safe and able to study the map more closely, they saw that it was not a map of the Alps, but of the Pyrenees. A map has value when you are lost, Carter said. It gives you a starting point. Lesson number two from story number two is that when you are lost, any approach, even a wrong one, can lead to a solution. Not doing anything at all is the bigger problem. As a synagogue community, we have tried our best to create a path forward. Not all of our solutions have worked. Sometimes we have backtracked, even at the last minute, as you could see by some of the calls I just made yesterday. But this has never discouraged us from trying. We are in the sanctuary tonight. And as I said, this is not something we should take for granted. And we're in here as a result of countless hours our ritual committee, executive committee, and board of directors and staff team have put in to get here. Each time asking the question, how can we adjust and adapt to the situation at hand? How can we gather even during a pandemic and keep our community safe? Stories in the Torah about our ancestors, including the ones we'll be reading on Rosh Hashanah, remind us how often our ancestors had to get lost in order to find their way. Whether this was Abraham and Sarah in their journey from Ur of the Chaldeans to Canaan, or Miriam and Moses leaving all they knew in Egypt and entering a frightening and unknown wilderness in search of a new home they would never even reach themselves. These expeditions paved the way for new generations, just like scientists today have paved the way for future COVID outbreaks. My final story about finding your way after getting lost is less of a story than a midrashic teaching from Breshit Rabbah, one I learned from my former pastoral education teacher in rabbinical school, Dr. Bobby Brightman, who in turn learned it from Rabbi Ari Lev Fanari, the rabbi of Kol Tzedek in West Philadelphia. How, the rabbis asked in the text, were our ancestors able to embark without knowing where they were headed and what they would encounter along the way? The answer given is that they were able to see an olam chadash, a new world. Lesson number three from story number three is to always keep in mind your final destination. In our case, a sanctuary free of COVID, where we can gather maskless and unafraid. Our olam chadash, new world, lies tantalizing close, yet frighteningly far. Many of us thought we had arrived there after we received our second vaccination many months ago. But sadly, the Delta variant had other plans for us. Only by getting lost can we find a new way back, remembering the three key lessons of the stories I shared. 1, we may not know the way forward, but we need not go forward alone. 2, even if we do not have conclusive facts about how to proceed, we must proceed anyway. And number 3, always keep in the back of our mind our olam chadash, the new world that we are trying to arrive at the end. I want you to close your eyes and I want you to picture a full sanctuary, our choir, all the things, that have been taken away from us these last 2 high holy days. Imagine them here. Imagine everyone you love gathered together freely and without fear. Hold on to that. Let us embark together tonight from our familiar starting place, the sanctuary of Congregation Shir Shalom, back out into the unknown, willing to get lost together, hoping that together we can find our way back safely home to a sweet, beautiful, COVID-free world in the year ahead, as we sang at Passover, L'Shana Tova B'li COVID, Hashanah Tova Mituka, a sweet and happy and healthy new year. Welcome home.